The Still Loading podcast is brought to you by the wonderful people on Patreon. Amazing people like Ryan K, Matt aka Stormageddon, Stephen P, Mr. Biscuits, Gilmer, Kevin from the Bit by Bit Foundation, and Eric H have all been wonderful enough to support the show over there. So if you would also like to get your name read at the beginning of an episode, along with a bunch of other goodies, go over to patreon.com/stillloadingpod and check out everything it has to offer. On this episode of Still Loading, a Resurgence. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of the Still Loading podcast. I'm your host, Josh Koval, and today on the show, I have a wonderful game developer to speak with you. It's been a long time since I've had an indie game dev on the show, and I'm here talking with Sam Leitch about his upcoming game, Wren's Resurgence, which will be out. When do you have it's right now? It just says quarter 2024. Do you have a month this year that you're expecting it to be out?
So it looks like it's going to be coming out this year. I can't foresee it changing.
Okay.
You know,
will it be out in September? Because that's when this episode's coming out. I just wanted to make sure.
No, of course. I don't believe it's going to be coming out this month.
All right. So look for it after this episode comes out, listeners, where we're talking about just like his work on his upcoming game, Wren's Resurgence, and we'll get into all that. But before we get into the game and everything, just welcome Sam Leitch. Sam, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Josh. Thank you for having me here. It's very exciting.
Thank you for being on. Thank you for being so gracious with that stumbling intro I gave you, going right for like, here, tell me a release date now.
Hey, you're digging. That's important. You know,
I know that hard hitting journalism. You tell me when this date comes. But no, thank you for coming on the show. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Wren's Resurgence is a 2D action platformer, action adventure platforming game that you can play currently. You can play the demo on Steam. You can play the demo right now. And it is from you. I guess the name of your studio is called Soliloquy Games.
That's correct. That is correct.
Where did the name come from, out of curiosity?
So a soliloquy is an act of speaking one's thoughts aloud. When by oneself or regardless of any hearers, especially by a character in a play. That's its like the actual definition of what a soliloquy is. Mm-hmm. And it really spoke to me about single player games and my development journey. You know, like the act of speaking one's thoughts aloud. I'm putting my thoughts into the games that I want to make. Specifically right now, Wren's Resurgence is the first game that I've made. And that word in itself, the concept is, it spoke to me. So that's where it came from. I'm also a large, Harry Mack fan, who is an impromptu kind of rapper. He just comes up with stuff off the top of his head.
Oh yeah, you've seen his videos a lot. Yeah,
he's incredible. And he had an album or a song that incorporated soliloquy, and that's where I kind of first drew that from. So it's not an homage. It's just the same word that he has used in one of his things. But I felt it. So that's how the name of the company came around. Name of the studio.
Oh, all right. So with Soliloquy Games, you are obviously making your first game here. And what kind of made you want to jump into making games? Like what was this something that you have done prior? Or is this like kind of a whole new experience for you?
Of course. No, this is all very, 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 very new. So when COVID struck, it hit obviously everybody pretty hard. A lot of change and a lot of craziness like everywhere. For me specifically, I was living in Sydney in Australia at the time. My wife was heavily pregnant and I essentially got let go from my job because I wasn't required in the automotive industry. And so I had some spare time, and we had a fresh newborn. My little boy Hendrix, who's now 4, because obviously that kicked off.
Quarentennial, as we're calling them.
It's incredible, right? Like the first COVID case in the hospital in my area was 4 floors down from where my wife was giving birth. So it was very, and at that point in time, we didn't really understand exactly what was happening, but we knew we wanted to get out of there. We got home, and newborns. I believe you have an offspring.
I have yes, I have an offspring. Yeah, I have a daughter who's 3.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of weird, I guess, downtime when you're not focusing everything on that little precious thing. And I felt that I wanted to do. Well, I had the ability. I was at home, and when I wasn't doing baby stuff, I wanted to, I guess, better myself. I wanted to sink my teeth into something new. And I was playing a game called RFL, which is a turn-based 2D. It wasn't pixel art, but it was. I was playing it, and I just was like, man, I think I could make this. It can't be that hard. And I was obviously very misinformed. That was an incredible game. It's pretty basic, but it's an incredible game. And I wasn't aware of how much went into game development, but I started my journey thinking that, you know what, I'm going to give this a go. I wanted to make something special. So I did a little bit of research, found out Unity, which is what the game engine, the game Resurgence is made in, was free. So I downloaded that, played around. I got into, from that, I got into coding, and then I had to figure out what I was going to kind of do after I'd made a few kind of botched, just random things. I needed to make something my own and something special. And I came up with the concept for Wren's Resurgence, which is this young woman, Wren, and I needed to make some artwork for her. So with no art experience, I found pixel art, and I was like, again, misinformed. I was like, you know what, that can't be that hard. So I thought I would I'd give that a go. And 4 years later, you make a lot of mistakes in any new endeavor you do. You learn by doing and making mistakes and growing and learning and developing from there. So it's been a long time in development, and there's been chops and changes every step of the way. But I think I've got a pretty solid game now, and the demo is out, which I believe you have played, and people are starting to kind of resonate a little bit with it. I've got a lot of feedback. I'm not sure if you had any you wanted to express, from your time.
I mean, I don't know if you want me. Do you want me to say it right on the mic?
I'm happy to hear it. And we can discuss it. I figured real time communication is what it's about.
Okay. I was not expecting it to go this way. All right. Yeah. So I guess then it is, for those who have not played it, it's a 2D side-scrolling platformer. You play, like you said, you play as Wren. The controls are pretty solid overall. I had some technical issues because the game pops up when you start up the demo. It says, "Hey, we recommend playing with a controller," which I definitely agree, because platformers I think feel best on controllers. So I had my PS4 controller plugged in, and I think I figured out the issue. I have to plug the controller in first before I start the game.
Sure.
Because if I don't, it really wonks stuff out. I honestly don't quite know if it was connecting to the game perfectly, even when I did that before, because there was one time I plugged it in first, started up the game, and then every time I would try to jump, Wren would automatically wall jump without any gripping onto the wall and slowly sliding down. She would just automatically wall jump, and it made it impossible for me to traverse.
Of course. I I'll be honest, don't have a PS4 controller. It's as outrageous as it sounds. I've got the PS5 ones. I've got the Xbox ones. I've got just a random controller, and that is on me for.
Well, no, I don't. But
I've had that
it
feedback.
ended up working later on, though. That's the weird thing. Like, I don't. I like that's me offering technical feedback, not like game
Interesting.
design feedback. And I don't know how to tell you to fix that because I'm not programming it, but B, also it's weird that it didn't work one time, but then I I closed out of the game, put unplugged and replugged the controller in, and
Mm-hmm.
then it just controlled fine. I did have to turn on like Steam's like kind of digital controller to like kind of make like to read the inputs type of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But once I did that, and I did that beforehand too. I don't know. So that was like the first experience with it. Is like there was some technical issues of trying to get the controller to work properly. But once I did, the game controlled very well. Also on the overall level design was a little bit hard to follow at times. I like the visuals, like going around and exploring it. For considering this is the first time you've ever done visuals, they are honestly kind of appealing. They look visually pleasing to at least to me. I can't speak for everybody. Um, and the music isn't bad either. Did you write the music or did you commission that?
That is actually that is from a guy that I've contacted online. It's purely free open source,
Okay.
um, and I was able to use it, which is obviously anybody can use it, but it's been adapted a little bit for the game. There are they are the songs in there are purely songs. To make them work on the levels, they need to be, they need to repeat. And there were some spikes and everything that have been changed by a friend of mine. But no, it's pretty basic stuff. I'll be honest.
Okay. Yeah, I like the visuals. It the knowing where to go sometimes was a little bit hard to figure out, but I eventually just kind of figured out you just pretty much you basically go from left to right once I kind of understood that. I think what
That's correct.
confused me is that there's so much verticality and it wasn't quite clear at first. But my actual like in terms of a like straight up feedback for the design, the first level when you can't you get the power up to grip the wall so that way you
Mm-hmm.
can actually pull yourself up on the ledges. It was weird to me that there was a whole level to the right side of it that didn't feel like is there anything you can do in there? Is it just more of a playground for you to explore?
It is just more for to get used to that kind of the characteristic of being able to jump and climb. There is a couple of, I guess, not Easter eggs. There's some stuff that you can only get in there after you have come back and done a few other things in the level, and throughout the other levels. There's a couple of
Mm,
upgrades to her.
like the wall climb that you get later on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's some upgrades for her. For Wren has what's called an Omamori charm, which is essentially her health. It just covers her when she gets hit. It takes damage instead of the monsters, the yokai that are in the game, physically hurting her. It damages this charm that her sister gave her, and you can upgrade that by picking up certain things throughout the levels. Um,
Okay.
and so
Okay.
there is one for boosting that in that level, and there's one for boosting her lunar gauge, which is essentially her special gauge. Part of the issue with the verticality that you were seeing in some of those levels, and I should make it more clear, I guess, and I'll figure out
That
that.
I mean, don't take my feedback with a grain of salt. Like you obviously, the way I would assume is like you would want to listen to a whole bunch. If a bunch of people are saying the same things as me, then yeah, that maybe there's something to it. But if it's just some schmuck's opinion online, like myself, you don't have to take it too seriously.
Well, I mean, it does become easier for the verticality later on in terms of the platforming with the wall climb, and there's a boost, and there's double jump, and there's all these other things that you can get
Are
later
all
on.
these in the demo as well?
They are not in the demo.
Okay. I just want to
Uh,
make sure I didn't miss them.
Of course, no. There is. It's a little so that the demo that I put out is essentially the start of the game. I feel it's the best way to get a feel of Wren as a character, an idea of the story,
I
which
agree with that. Yeah, I'd agree with
which
that.
which I think helps create like an emotive connection with her and with the game, that you don't get from just being able to jump around the levels really fast. And it was a tricky decision to go with just the start of the game, over. So there's 10 main levels, and a good portion of them are only traversable once you get specific upgrades. You can play through most of them without them, so you can play through the game with only getting the very bare minimum. It's not the fastest or the easiest way to play through the game through to the end, but you can do it. And you also obviously miss out on certain weapons and upgrades for Wren and for her attacks, and there's stuff that you miss out. But there's multiple ways to play it, which is exciting.
What I would offer as a suggestion then, at
Yeah.
least for the first level,
Mm.
is make that village, because there's a village pretty much to the right hand side of where you start. You kind of start in like this cave looking area, um, from what I remember. And then there's a village to the right. I would make that completely inaccessible until you make it only accessible with the power ups that you get, or if someone figures out how to kind of break game physics. That's more speedrunner tactics. But
Yeah.
the reason I would say that is because I spent a whole lot of time exploring around, because I'm in most games you're taught go left to right.
Yeah.
And so you
Yeah.
would go left to right, and then there's nothing over there. So then you go all the way back, and then you would go up, and then that's the door right there. I I think if you want to do that, make that the whole level. Like, have it be like you can't go up right away. You have to go all the way from left to right, and then go up to the top. Then do the top half of the level and go right to left, and then the exit to the next screen is there. If you're going to keep that quick jump, because there's basically like a shaft that you can go up. You have to hop from platform to platform. You can't just go straight up. But either if you want to keep that there, I would completely make the other part of the level inaccessible, because otherwise it's kind of confusing to explore something that doesn't mean anything to you in that moment. Like, I have it, I because your objective of teaching the player the mechanics of the jumping is done really well just by going straight up that shaft, because you have to use the ledge grab to get up there. You have to do it like 6, 7, 8 times to do it. So
Certainly.
you don't need the entire right side of the level to teach players a skill that you already pretty effectively taught them in that first shaft. If you want to elongate it and you don't want to cut out that side, then I would suggest get rid of that shaft and make it, go all the way left to right, or however far to the right you want to go, and then you go up, and then you go back the way you came. So the exit is still above you if you want it there. Um,
It's
but you
really,
can.
that is actually really solid feedback. I, the, yeah, okay. I'll look into that, because you do need to, well, there's hints to when you get up to that second level, which is the forest. Where Swan where she gets taken. There is information in there that they go down back through the through down back into the village, and open up an extra path. And that is how you gain access to the undervillage. That's where you can get the map, and there's like a big kind of important looking thing down there, which will come into play later on in the game. But yeah, so coming back down and clearing that path is a good excuse to then open that village back up again for people to move back around. So that's I do like that. I like that idea a lot. And streamlining it is incredible. So
That's what I think, that more than anything, because you don't need that whole that whole village that early on. Just honestly, it confused me a little bit, because I'm like, okay, why is this here? I can't. There's nothing for me to do here. I already know how to get up over here, because you taught me. You taught me with the power up right then and there. So That at least that's my suggestion. I will say as a compliment to not just to go with just constructive feedback. Well, the negative side of constructive feedback, some positive side. I actually like that first little boss in the demo, the little tree, and I don't know if it was intentional, but we're just going to say it is because we're going to give you credit for this. I like the the little green caterpillar worm things, because they're yokai, I believe, right? A lot of the
Correct.
enemies are very Japanese inspired.
They are.
Not just inspired; it's Japanese folklore. When they shoot their little tentacles out, they kind of you. You cannot defeat a worm with the number of slashes needed before it attacks you. So you have to slash, 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 jump over it, go to the other side, and slash, slash, slash if you don't want to take a hit.
Yeah.
And having that kind of arcing, that jumping back and forth, excuse me, from side to side to kill the worm, honestly did really well in the boss for it, because that's what it has two hands that try to grab at you, so you have to jump from side to side, while also these like blood red like spikes come out of the ground. I'm not sure I guess those were the roots actually.
Yeah, it's pretty gross, that whole concept of that tree. So that Jiboku, I believe it's pronounced, is a tree that was some context for it, that was on a battlefield where a lot of people have died, and essentially has absorbed the blood from all of those, and has become like a ghost, like a monster tree. And it uses its, my take on it is, yes, it shoots its roots up out of you, it swings its arms, and it has these little kind of blood minions that are in that little area as well, which are pretty easy to dispatch,
Yeah.
but they do kind of get in the way, and they are a bit annoying. So one of the big bits of feedback I've got from the demo, which Josh, I really appreciate the information you gave me. I've played this game so many times that I do sometimes forget about the simple, obvious answer of just stopping, like closing an area off until you need to be able to get back there, or to streamline it, which I do appreciate. One of the other bits of feedback was that first boss fight with the big tree was awful. I was like, okay, well, that's not great. That's not great. It's not great. It's not great feedback. But from that, I've been able to draw bits of information from other people that have played and have improved it. One of the bits of the information that I was not even aware of was, if you jump and you attack in the air, you actually void off all velocity of Wren as a character. She jumps and swings and stops and just falls straight down. And I don't do a lot of attacking in the air when I play. I had kind of not really noticed that before. So that has been improved. The spawn time is now... So enemies, how it works structurally in the game is, an enemy is in a level when you spawn in. They're kind of patrolling a certain route or a certain space, a certain area that I've put them in.
Mm-hmm.
If you destroy them, they do essentially respawn. They come back from the yokai realm, and they have currency on them. They have shards on them, and that is what is required for them to traverse that realm. And that's why when you kill them, you send them back, and you actually get that currency that they dropped. So that's justifying why they have the currency on them. And that whole mechanic is now a bit more adjustable. It's a bit more open to people's, how they feel the game should play. Originally, I had it set to 30 seconds. They would come back in. And now you can pick, that they spawn fast, they spawn slowly, they it takes a long time. So I wanted to make it more accessible for people that didn't like that aspect of it. It's now adjustable, and that's now in the game as well. And that's purely just from feedback from people that have played the level and have fought that boss and have fought those little, blood monsters.
That's interesting that someone didn't like that boss. It was a pretty simple boss, but I think you taught the mechanic through the types of enemies that you put forth, and then you just had to master. You had to do a more complex version of that mechanic with the boss. I don't know. I thought the boss was interesting. I didn't think it was a bad boss or anything like that. The health bar was a little confusing to follow. I don't know if it has multiple health bars. I'd have to replay the demo just to see, like, just to pay attention to the health bar again. But I kept seeing, like, it looked like it was filling up and then it would just fill up again. It felt like, so I wasn't
Yeah,
quite sure.
that's all right. Look, it does. It has 3 stages to it, and its attacks and the root how the roots attack and the enemies actually change for each
Okay.
stage. Now there is meant to be not a cutscene, but there is a process that is meant to happen when you destroy its health bar that has not that doesn't happen. Essentially, it is immune for a moment, and then its health back as comes back to full, and then its attacks and that whole process changes, and it is not working as nice as I would like it to in the demo. It is meant to be a bit more obvious what is going on, but it's not.
Yeah, I would suggest adding, I don't know what they would be, but add some visual indicators, like maybe like have the tree's arms like flex, like "Rah!" Like it's mad at you or something like that. Like you could even have like the arms be highlighted, almost like they like have the whole shape of the main part of the tree highlighted, including its arms, so it'll stay highlighted when it moves and kind of flexes, and that's how you know it's shifting into a new phase.
Yeah, yeah. No, that tree has been the bane of my existence for so long. I've simplified it right down to just swinging its arms and having these spikes that come out of the ground. It was super complicated. It was there was a lot of stuff that happened, and it wasn't necessary. It wasn't fun, which is a big part of why we play games. Sometimes difficulty, I understand, is part of fun. People failing and understanding mechanics and growing and getting better, it is a big part of it. But for me, I'm pretty good at games. I dedicate a good portion of my life to it. It was impossible. I couldn't beat it, and it became more apparent when more people were playing that it was just it was excessive. It's also one of those optional bosses that you don't have to fight. And
Because you can just run past it, can't you?
you can. It does change how you play the game. You can't
You can't wall climb if you don't beat it. I don't believe.
spoiler, you can't grab onto walls.
Oh, sorry.
And no, it's not actually. It's just not a spoiler. But it's like, yeah, you can't. You get that upgrade when you beat it, and then you can literally traverse any flat surface in the game. Any surface that's vertical, you can grab onto and climb, and it changes, traversal a fair amount. And you can play the game without it, but it changes it pretty drastically.
Well, overall, I did genuinely enjoy the demo. Like, I'd be curious to see what the rest of the game is, because it like the first little bit that I played, it wasn't like, being honest, it wasn't like the most exciting, but it also wasn't bad. Like, it's something where I'm like, I can see the promise in this. Like, I can see what you're going for, and like what, like like it's already fun, and I can see how much you're pouring into it. And I think it's going to turn out well. Like, genuinely, I do. I'm not saying that just to be nice. When being honest, when I was having all the technical issues, I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to say to Sam when I talk to him. I can't get this goddamn game to work. But then once I did, I was like, okay, this works now. Because at first I thought, like, the automatic jump off of the automatic wall jumps, I'm like, why would anyone design it this way? It turns out you didn't. Something weird with the controller was going on.
Oh man! So while we've been having this conversation, I've purchased a PS4 controller, so there's one on the way, and I'm going to deal with those problems. That's something I should have done a while ago.
Difficulty testing and like game testing in general is such a tricky art, because especially like in someone in your shoes, like it would be hard for me to handle feedback. Like, and that's why when I'm giving mine, I'm always trying to be like, well, this is why I felt this way. And like, I hate it when people just say, well, this game sucks because I don't like it. I'm like, okay, well, why don't you like it? That doesn't help anybody. And that doesn't help if you want better games, that doesn't help the designers realize why does this suck or why is it, you know what I mean? So I don't that you have a thicker skin than I is what I'm trying to say.
Look, over like communicating with people like this, it's not bad at all because I can understand where you are coming from. If you really hated it, I could ask you that question. But like, so where did it fall off, or what happened, but it's those. I don't want to call them internet trolls, but it's the people that just leave feedback like, "Oh, the game sucks. The colors are all wrong. The art leaves a lot to
Colors
be."
are wrong.
Well, like, it's a funny statement, but like I have had that feedback, and I understand more about color theory now than I did when I made 90% of the game.
It's yeah.
It is more important than anything else realistically when it comes to the art. You can have the most beautiful picture in the world, but if it's if the colors are all wrong and they all clash and you can't see the depth and you can't understand the layering and what's happening in the foreground and the background, then it doesn't matter how good it is, it's lost. And I've redone a couple of the levels, and I've redone a whole bunch of the art, because it was 3.5 years ago when I was first figuring out how it all worked. But you just got to start. You got to get in. You got to without if I'd stopped until I was good at art, I would still be on the first level, 4 years later. So it's a tricky. Well, it's tricky figuring out when the game is ready, when it's finished, and the parts
that is because I took game design courses in college.
Sure.
And one of the things that I remember learning is like you're gonna release a game and you're still not going to be like 100% satisfied with, like there's always going to be something more you wish you could have done or wish you could do in order to complete, like something you wish you could have added to the game but you ran out of time to do, because at some point you have to release it, you have to like put it out, because otherwise you're just in a never ending state of tweaking that kind of thing.
Yeah it's really hard because my father is an artist. He's an oil paints on canvas, landscapes, beautiful, vast scenery, understands color theory and everything, and it skipped me. I'm sure I could have probably learnt from somebody who was that skilled, but when I was younger, it was not a priority for me. And that is an opportunity that I look back on now, and I mean, like, that's lost. I could have grown, and I could have learnt from somebody that really understands it. And I really only understand it now, 4 years after, trying to figure out how to put squares together to make them look decent. So, growth and learning is what this is all about, and I'm very happy with how it looks now. There's always little things that you can change, and even during our conversation, I've figured a few things out. So this has been very, very informative. It's been great for me, and great for the game, I believe.
And this has nothing to do with me on my show, but I think it's also, honestly, I think this type of conversation's really, maybe this is a little too like self-aggrandizing, but I feel like it's interesting to my listeners, at least from my like, if I was a listener, here's a better way to phrase it. If
Sure.
I was a listener, I would be really interested to hear such a candid conversation about game making from someone who's like, you're making a game for your first time ever, and just kind of seeing, like, dealing with feedback and like figuring out how to make, like, how to design something. And like, I don't know, I've never listened to something this close to like the while you're in the midst of developing, if that makes sense, as close to the hands-on process as I've ever been. So I think that this will be really interesting for my listeners. I want to ask you though, about your personal background in games themselves. Like, I see a lot of different influences in Wren's Resurgence. I see some Ninja Gaiden influence in here. I'm assuming with the whole like kind of sword mechanic and everything like that. I also see with kind of how there's a lot of verticality in your levels. It kind of reminds me of like 16-bit platformers in the same vein as like maybe like Cool Spot or trying to think about it, like where the objective of the game was you have a full screen to explore all over the place, and then you do have like a designated exit or something like that. But instead of being a very linear left to right, you can kind of explore around a little bit more. So I kind of see little influences of that, and I want to know how close am I correct in any of those guesses, or like what are some of your influences on games for this?
Of course. I tried to draw what I believe were the best characteristics of some of my favorite older games into this, and it was it's hard to say exactly where it comes from. It's not a Metroidvania, which was where I started. When I started off, I wanted to make a Metroidvania.
Mm-hmm.
But the aspects of those games that I don't like are their main mechanic, which is essentially puzzles. And I love fast traversal, and a very funny aspect of it is it's not as fast as Sonic, but that was a draw for me. It was just purely from the speed and how you interact with the level. Now, unlike Sonic, this is an action platformer. You purely stop, jump, swing, cut.
Yeah.
It's very different. But I wanted to capture some of those vibes when you do speed up in the game. That it is that is a fun aspect of it. If you can get in that rhythm of jumping and swinging, and not swinging, but jumping and cutting, swinging with your sword, it is that is a big draw for me. I can't give you a list. There is too many inspirations to draw from in
Well,
terms of.
could you list just like one or two then? Just out of curiosity, like is Ninja Gaiden on that list? Was I close at all?
Yeah, no, definitely, man, definitely.
Yes.
I
I got one right.
One of the difficult things for me is I've got no way to play old games. So a big part of what I drew from was my experience with these games as I was growing up. I had, it might sound funny, but Alex Kidd.
Yeah.
I played that first level. That was, I think it was the inbuilt game on the Master System. I think that was the first. I think that was the first console I had. That would have been like in '95, something like that. I played that first level thousands of times, where you essentially you load and you jump down a rock face, and I've spent hundreds of hours playing that game and playing that level. And I remember that I think there's ghosts and there's like these birds that jump around that you have to kind of figure out their pattern and move around them and jump down and time and find the killing blocks or something like that. And as I've been developing, I draw from things like that. And it is just I got the PlayStation, the very first one, so not PlayStation 1, but PlayStation, when it came out. And I still have, I got the PS5 now, and I've played a lot of stuff in that time. And it's really just the culmination of all the side-scrolling games that I've played. I tried to draw the best of them from my memory into the game. I had a SNES, I believe, or an NES. And I was much like Alex Kidd. I was just playing around with it. I never got really good, so I never got very far. I have replayed the first Mario with my oldest boy. He loves that the first level. He still struggles with the first Goomba. I think is what their name is. The very first enemy that you fight in that game.
Yeah, the Goomba.
Goomba, yeah. It's his mortal enemy. I believe that is the enemy that's killed more players than any
I've
other
heard
in
that
existence.
theory. I've heard
Yeah,
that theory, and I kind of subscribe to it as well.
yeah. Well, that's for him. That's his name is Hendrix. His arch nemesis in terms of games right now is that first little Goomba. So just seeing him play and see how he interacts with the controller and see how he interacts with the level has been amazing for me, because I see it, I remember it, and he's going to expand and grow as well. And seeing how he interacts with the game at the levels has given me inspiration in a couple different places on how to make my game, how to make it accessible, and it's been awesome.
So in this game, the enemies are yokai or Japanese. I believe yokai is demons in Japanese folklore.
Yeah, ghosts and monsters and
Ghosts
demons.
and
It's like
monsters. Yeah.
it's kind of a conglomeration of all the kind of that gross, horrifying stuff.
What made you choose like the Japanese yokai as like a theme and like the kind of like the aesthetic of this game? What
Of
drew you
course.
to that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been fascinated by Japanese culture from a very early age. I I still like anime.
Mm-hmm.
I started watching Dragon Ball Z when it aired. It was like,
Rest in peace, Akira Toriyama.
oh man, it's so sad, right?
Oh, it was brutal.
I didn't realize how sad I was going to be, and
I call myself a lapsed anime fan just
yeah,
because I haven't had time to watch, and I don't prioritize it when
of
I do
course.
have time. But when Akira Toriyama passed away, man, earlier this year I did an entire thing called Toriyama Month where I did Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3.
Hmm.
I did deep dive review episodes on Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3 and Chrono Trigger.
Oh, dude,
Um,
I'm gonna have to. I haven't honestly. I haven't checked out enough of your content. I'll have to have a look into that because that's so cool, man. I love that so much. So back back to the question.
yes,
Um,
yeah.
Dragon Ball Z. When One Piece started, I was all over that. I love cartoons. I love animation.
Mm.
And that grew into I can't remember when I started watching Initial D, but that kicked off. That's probably one of the most important things in my life at that point of time. Anyway, is that started me down the automotive road. Um, I've had a numerous AE86s, which is the kind of the hero car from that show, and it really did help kind of not twist my reality, but kind of focused my ambitions to uh, for that part of my life anyway. So, and I got into I was trained to be a mechanic. I was basically in the automotive industry for a good long time,
Hmm.
and I have never really stopped watching anime. Absorbing that stuff. I'm definitely not as avid as what I used to be.
What's some of the shows that you've been watching recently then?
What have I been watching recently? So One Piece is always one I always go back to.
I
There's
mean, that's all.
always
It's never ending.
That's the thing. That's the thing. Like there's I can always watch more of that. I did just find out that they are the guys that made Attack on Titan are essentially remaking it.
What? Okay.
It's going to be a bit more streamlined. A bit more. The pacing is going to be a bit more modern. I think. I mean, One Piece is 25 years old, so
Yeah.
they're going to streamline. I don't know how many episodes it's going to be, but it's going to be more uh, concise. I guess like the live action show that they put out. So I'm very excited about that. And yeah, talking about blanking.
I
What have
think
I
the
been?
last one that I tried watching, it was actually back before my daughter was born in the
Okay,
midst of the pandemic. So while you were making games, I was like, you know what? I'm finally going to watch anime again. That's what I'm going
yeah,
to do with the pandemic time. And I didn't even do that. I started watching an anime called Black Cat, which is kind of old.
okay.
want to say late 90s, early 2000s is when it came out.
Yeah.
I think it's late, like early 2000s. I don't remember much about it anymore. It's been 4 years since I tried to watch it. And ultimately what ended up happening was, instead of doing that, I got into Twitch streaming, and I still
Hmm.
stream on Twitch now, but it's like, back then I didn't have a daughter, so I was doing it literally every single day. I was able to stream every single day. But yeah, so that was the last one I watched. It was Black Cat.
Sure, sure. I really enjoyed the solo leveling show they've put out, because I really enjoyed reading that. So I really enjoyed the anime adaptation they've done. Jujutsu
Mhm.
Kaisen was cool. I'm just actually having a look, through my Crunchyroll right now. Kaiju number 8. Oof, I love that. Um, so that that was a big part of my life, and Japan always appealed to me. It was so foreign, I guess, as I grew up in New Zealand, in Wellington, in New Zealand,
Mhm.
and I mean, now I reside in Australia, but you know, culturally still very similar. Japan seems so interesting and so cool, and I think yokai are a part of that. It is so There's so much information on this, like the history of where these monsters come from and how they became what they were, and um, I don't think enough games have focused on that aspect of it. There's a whole bunch of games out there that do, but I saw it as a way to incorporate my love for Japan and yokai and um, side scrolling.
Mhm.
That's kind of where the concept of the game came from.
I
Um,
getcha.
so Ren has loss very early in the game. Essentially, the concept is her and her sister are in this village. You get the idea that they are under the control, and they're essentially slaves to these yokai that take her family and the people that she lives with away to seemingly carrying pickaxes and things to work in a mine. And you find out a bit more about that later on in the game. But Swan gives Ren her Omamori, which is her pendant that stops her from taking damage at the start of the game.
Mhm.
You transition out of the cave, out of the village, and Swan is then attacked and taken. And the story is essentially Ren, the main character, is her trying to get her sister back, her only real semblance of family that she has left, and that is her main draw to keep moving forward. She does meet a few friends on the way, which are some twists and turns. There are yokai that are not maybe following exactly what Emma wants them to do, the big bad. Um, and so she does get some assistance, but that's more just in kind of direction, giving her
Mhm.
no, allowing her to know where to go. Um, but that is the main draw for me anyway, and how and why I made Ren's Resurgence the way that I did.
What was like the research and selection process of the yokai, like the yokai enemies? Did you toil over that? Was that something you put a lot of time and thought into, or did you choose it based off of theme or off of the visual look of each yokai?
So my versions of the yokai are not what you would probably see traditionally. Some of them I changed them to befit the aesthetic that what I wanted that enemy. I wanted an enemy to do something in a level often, and I would weave that together with what I wanted to draw. Like there's a more aquatic area. You don't go in the water as a main mechanic in that level. There is water, but so that's the harbour, and there are yokai that are more prone to those areas. And there is a mountainous area, there's like a toxic area, and they all have their kind of their place. And so I found yokai that fit those aesthetics, and those, that being with, they've got such a rich history, and um, there's so much knowledge and everything to draw from. Maybe not knowledge, but there's so much data for yokai to draw from. I was able to
Mm-hmm.
to find stuff that would work. And yes, some I just had to kind of twist and make into my own uh, exaggerated variants on the data provided. If that makes sense, if that answers your question.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. One of the other questions I have for you, especially with how much work it is to make a game, and this is your first game you've ever made, how are you managing your work-life balance? Like, is this your full-time job? Are you doing this on the side? How do you balance having a family while also doing all this? Like, what type of balance have you, or what have you done to find a balance between all those things?
The biggest thing for me is having such a supportive spouse, such a supportive partner. My wife she understands that this is my passion, and she understands that it is something that I want to dedicate my life to, and that understanding has enabled me to spend serious time on it. I work nights. Packing shelves just to bring in essentially some pocket money for the family, spending money for spending time with the kids and, holidays and things like that. And she is the breadwinner. And I am a full at-home dad when I'm not, obviously doing nights and when she's not in the office. So that has been hard for her. She wants to be there with the family to help raise them and everything, and it is more on me. So she has sacrificed a lot in that regard, but our family is thriving. I love spending time with the boys, and any chance that I can get on and do game development, that's when I'm doing it. So I'm able to put the boys in a couple of days in a daycare. So they get looked after and they get, conditioned with being near other kids. And so they are growing and developing. And that's not the leading factor as to why we put them in daycare, but it has been incredible for them. They've grown and everything so much just from that. It's been really, really good. So daycare, I work nights, and my wife is very, very open to me spending serious time getting better and honing my craft in game development. That's how I'm able to do it.
Oh, that's cool. That's that type of balance is hard to find too, and you have like everyone's situation is different. I'm very lucky that my wife and I we are very much. I think I don't know if I've said it on the show or not. My wife and I know I've said it on other people's shows. My wife and I are very much the definition of like opposites attract. And so while we're both introverts and we like to spend time at home and kind of like in our own little bubbles and everything, we also like to do what we like to do. And her interests are not my own. She's not big into games. She's not big into anime or geek culture or anything like that. So when she is downstairs either crocheting or watching like TV or watching a movie, I'm usually up here editing a podcast, recording a podcast or some other such thing. So it's kind of funny how that works out. That's awesome though. That's awesome that you're able to have that work-life balance because not everyone is able to. And it's cool to be a stay-at-home dad. That's a full-time job. I know you're still sending them to childcare, but that's mainly for socialization more than anything. And my daughter has her own struggles with socializing. I think quarentennials, not all of them, but at least with her, that quarentennial thing has really made it hard because she was not used to people for quite some time.
It was crazy, right? It was,
yeah.
It's nuts. I'm not sure how it's hit you guys over in the States, slowly immersing yourself back into that environment. But for us, it was really, really tricky for a long time.
My wife and I, it was hard too. There's a lot of people over here, without going into politics or anything like that, who were just like, nah, it's not real. And there's lots of areas of the U.S. that it never even felt like the pandemic even happened. But that's neither here nor there. Sure. I don't have to go into all that. But no, so that's really cool though. So I guess a couple last things on Wren's Resurgence, and then we'll wrap up the episode. When you are designing the game, what are some of the things that you personally have tried to make sure are in the game? Like, because it's a 2D action platform, but what elements of a 2D action platformer speak to you? You don't have to list the influences per se, because that's going to be very vast. But like, what do you personally look for in an action platformer, a 2D action platformer?
Sure. I playing the game, first and foremost, it needs to be fun. And for me, that meant kind of fast, like fluid, and dynamic, having options and different ways of traversing, different ways of interacting with the environment, and drawing the line between being hard and being uh,
Like approachable,
yeah,
maybe.
yeah. I didn't want the combat to be a slog, uh, but I need it to be uh, difficult enough for you to grasp it, to understand what you have to do, or get the idea of what you have to do to fight each of the enemies. And honing that has been one of the hardest parts of the game. That really has been what I've kind of struggled with the most over the like the recent times, where the game theoretically is content complete. All the enemies are in the game. The levels are sorted. The story is done. The pickups, all that aspect is in the game. But then making it fun, understanding what makes it fun, and
Hmm.
growing and developing, and changing those aspects and modifying them in a way that enables uh, gameplay for 10 hours and for it not to be tedious. Because some of it can be. I understand that.
Yeah.
And really coming to grips with the game is and understanding the why things are the way they are. It certainly takes time, and you have to kind of go through that tedious grind sometimes. Um, but that is really how I go about doing it. I make an enemy, understand why they are the way they are, um, and kind of develop my own way of fighting that and understanding that, and hopefully other people can see that as well, and it makes kind of sense when you're playing the game. If that answers your question again.
No, that answered that. I that answers my question. I that's about all the questions I got for you, Sam. Thank you so much once again for coming on the show and for chatting with me and for being so candid about game development. Um, I want to my two final questions for you. One is from I always take listeners of the show know I take one of Alan Alda's questions from his podcast called he has a podcast called Clear and Vivid. It's awesome podcast, definitely worth checking out with the actor Alan Alda. And he ends his episodes by asking all of his guests 8 questions, quick 8 simple questions and about 8 quick answers. I'm not going to ask all 8 questions, don't worry. But I always pick. There's like 2 that I always kind of go back and forth with. So I've been asking the same one for a while, so I'm going to switch it up. This one is: what is something that you wish you really understood?
Something that I wish I really understood. It broad?
Yes, it can be literally anything. I like that. It's a very
Sure.
broad question because it can be interpreted in a number of ways. So
Okay.
I don't want to
Yeah,
clarify because I want to let you
of
first thing that
course.
pops in your head, just something you wish you understood.
I wish I understood people more. Motivations. I wish I understood why people do what they do.
Hmm.
For myself, for my for my children, be it empathy, be it uh, I just I wish I I guess was open more to understand why people do what they do. I feel
Hmm.
that would enable personal growth for me, and it would enable me to communicate more with other people. Um, and the only thing holding me back from doing that really is just by not getting to know people more, and not having a broad enough spectrum of people that I know well
Hmm.
to understand them. If that makes if that if that makes
That
sense.
makes a lot of sense. I can totally understand that. It walking in someone else's shoes so you can understand their worldview and their viewpoint and everything like that. It's tough because a lot of times, and I'm guilty of this personally, when you hear someone else's viewpoint, you almost want to kind of especially depending on what viewpoint it is. Like if it's a game, I'm like, oh, that's cool, that's interesting that you have that point of view. But when it's like something political, that I'm like, well, I don't know if I think your viewpoint is wrong for A, B, and C reasons, and I feel the need to correct someone, even though I could be wrong for all I know. um and
People
that
are we're complex beings, people,
Yes.
and everybody. The crazy. We don't have to get too deep into, but having a child, it really. I have two. I have a 2 and a 4-year-old. So they're people, but they haven't really developed into. Well, they certainly haven't developed into who they're going to be when they're older. But having children has enabled me to understand people a little bit more, some of that motivation factor, but it also has enabled me to understand possibly how people got to being where that they are. And understanding that has enabled me to be a little bit more understanding of people. If I see an angry person or I meet an angry person, to that it's not maybe all on them. And that personal growth on me, that understanding a little bit more about people, has really changed the way that I look at everything. Everyone was a baby once, and how they deal and how they adapt to situation is learnt. And part of it is probably passed down to them genetically, probably in some
A
way.
large portion, I would argue, sometimes.
I mean, it's obviously so hard to tell, but it's
Yeah.
you see somebody that's angry or somebody that's sad or somebody that's gone through a bad experience, and I think having that empathy, to not understand who and why they are, has changed the way that I deal with people as the great on the greater.
I think having kids is like what you said is so spot on. Like one of the things that having a kid has taught me is just so much more patience with people, because you have to have so much more patience with your children, and then in turn I'm able to kind of use that as patience with people. Not all the time, I'm not perfect obviously, but no, that I can understand that. Wishing you understood people's motivations is a very I feel that a lot. There. One of the answers on that Alan Alda podcast was the person wished they understood cruelty, which kind of ties in with what you're saying. Like, why does someone want to be cruel to somebody?
Cruelty is a really interesting thing to try and comprehend. How could you treat somebody that way? And there's got to be obviously a lot that goes into it.
Yeah, yeah.
Oof, yeah, crazy.
Um, Final question.
Yes.
This is questions from Courtney. Da, 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 da. Questions from Courtney. Courtney's my wife. She famously does not know anything about my guests or my topics or anything of that nature. So I normally ask her right before the interview, but she is away this weekend. So I found a whole list that she sent me from, let's see, how long ago was this? July 31st, 2023. So she sent me 10. She sent me 10, and they're all kind of varying levels of randomness. What is something that you thought was normal growing up but have learned it's actually not?
Something I learned something I thought was normal growing up, but is actually not.
Yes.
I I My parents separated when I was very young, um, and I spent a lot of time with my father. I'm sure I mentioned it earlier on. He's an artist. That's what he does
Mm-hmm.
all day, every day. And I thought it was normal to have somebody that you thought was, my father was like that God being for me. He was like the man. He knew everything. He knew how to do everything. He knew how to deal with any situation. Growing up and him being there for me always. any situation, he was there. He had the capability of being there. He lived close to the school for us. He lived in the same place for 20 years, my whole youth. So there was always that kind of that home. And he was always around because he was always in the house. He worked from home. And a lot of people don't get that privilege. A lot of people have, their mother at home, which is, a huge deal. I would have loved to spend more time with my mum growing up. But for me, it was my dad, and it was, as an adult, I now understand how pivotal was for me in terms of my own growth and in terms of enabling certain aspects of my life to move and flow in the way that they did. Hopefully that kind of.
No, that I could that makes sense. I hear you don't want to go too personal, which makes total sense. You never want to go too personal on the internet. I totally get that, but I can understand. That's really cool though. That's still that's such a, especially that he was an artist. I feel that had to have a huge impact on you growing up.
Oh, my dad is super weird as well, and that could have something to do with just being an artist. I'm not sure. But I've been around what I would consider, seeing the rest of the world, weird now. He's very not emotional, but very in tuned emotively, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And my dad never raised his voice. He was a beautiful man, and he's still around. I shouldn't say he was. He is a beautiful. He is a beautiful,
he was a beautiful man. He's not dead. Don't worry.
No, he's still kicking. And everyone that's ever met him, say, oh, he's so cool, and I'm very lucky. So and that has inspired me to be better, and try and do better and provide the same kind of things to my kids. I don't want to strive to be like, oh, your dad's so cool, but to be there for them and provide stability is a big part, I guess, as well.
No, that's cool. That's cool. I guess to answer it for myself, I would say I grew up very religious, very conservative Christian. I'm now I'm definitely not conservative anymore. But it's just funny to me because I didn't realize how evangelical my parents were. How
Right.
in what I mean by that is growing up, my parents would always introduce us to Christian media, and there's some good stuff out there, but there's a lot of stuff where it's just I didn't realize how that was only people in evangelical circles. They only knew about that. Most of the population did not know about it. And there's a podcast I haven't listened to at all, but I've been meaning to for a while, called Good Christian Fun. It's about a bunch of, as I guess they call themselves, ex-evangelicals, and just kind of talking about Christian culture, in the US. And one of the things they brought up, because they started listing a whole bunch of things like Amy Grant, the singer Amy Grant, and then Veggie Tales, which Veggie Tales broke out into the mainstream a little bit too, but all these different things. And I went, oh, my parents introduced me to all of these things. I guess I was also in this same group and I did not even realize it.
Yeah, and I have really good friends. One of my really good friends when I was younger came from a very Christian household, and he rebelled from it at a pretty early age, and it was really interesting to watch how their family dealt with it. I'm not religious myself, but I could see the positive aspects of it are incredible. It, for him at least, his growth as a person really skyrocketed when he was no longer, I don't want to say tied down, but was limited in his scope of where he could go and what he could do.
Yeah.
And for him, he is still religious, not on the same level as what his family was, but it is he drew a lot of the really what I would consider a lot of the good stuff. Be kind to others, treat people well, and they'll treat you well. Don't do illicit drugs. There's some really, really positive, really, really
Well,
positive stuff that he's told me about how his life has changed.
at least for me, without going into too personal stuff,
Sure.
too personal, I should say. Like, I guess for me, I one of the biggest eye-opening things for me is realizing that I still somewhat have my faith, just not what it used to be. But that a lot of it was when we are taught our religion growing up, whatever, at least for us Christians in the US, when we assume that it's being taught from a neutral perspective, we assume that everything that is said by pastors in the church is from this neutral perspective, when in actuality there's a whole bunch of Christians and it doesn't even have to be Christianity, it could be something else, or people out there who aren't that, and for some reason they are ostracized from the main group of them because their interpretation of the scriptures are not the same as the other people's. And I'm not going to go into it. There was a whole reason that I've kind of turned away from that, and I've become much more liberal as I've and more progressive as I've gotten older, just because of stuff that I've seen within my religious upbringing. But anyway, on the happier side of it, not really the more heavy side of it.
Yes.
It was when I discovered that people didn't know who Bible Man was, who was like this Christian superhero that you could watch on. It's awful. It's atrocious. It's you can Google it. It's one of the worst pictures you'll ever see, like Bible Man VHS or some shit like that. It's awful.
Wow.
Yeah. It is something to behold, let me tell you.
Now I am not a massive proponent for grading shows and movies and games in particular, because obviously that's important to me in the industry I'm going into. I just can't grasp putting an arbitrary number to something to explain to other people its value. I believe you should find people that you have the similar taste, you understand how and why they feel the way they do about games, and if something resonates with them, then there's a good chance it's going to resonate with you. I believe that is where reviews and things like that should be drawn from. And I have people that I follow that I believe in their taste, and I can understand and guides my direction and my playing of games based on their feedback. But I see on IMDb that this Bible Man has a 2.9 out of 10. That's not a good number. Not that that's important, not that should be the guiding light.
No,
but I probably won't check that out.
Well, I think it's also kind of funny that according to Google users, 69% of the people like this TV show. That's not going to make a lot of Christians happy either. Wow. That's 69%.
That's unfortunate.
A very nice number right there.
Or intentional. Maybe read it and we don't know about it. Maybe they planned this. Who knows? Crazier things are happening.
Yeah. So anyway, that will do it for this episode of Still Loaded. We should wrap up this episode. Sam, once again, thank you for joining me. Where can the good people find you online? And of course, where can people find Wren's Resurgence?
The easiest place to find it is on Steam at the moment. I'm looking to try and get it out elsewhere, but for now, the demo is available on Steam. If you have access to Steam, Wren's Resurgence, WRENS. Wren's Resurgence, RESURGENCE. You can go to wrensresurgence.com. You can email me, Sam at Soliloquy Games. So that's the name of the company, Sam at soliloquygames.com. Otherwise, just all the normal channels, you should be able to find me if need be.
All right. As for myself, you can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, at Still Loading Pod on all those locations, at Twitch at Still Loading Pod, at Still Loading Podcast on YouTube. If you want to support the show, you can do so in a number of ways. You can give it a 5-star rating or review on whichever podcasting app you use, because that pleases the algorithm gods and it makes me feel warm and fuzzy. I like feeling warm and fuzzy. You can also support the show monetarily by going to patreon.com/stillloadingpod. For as little as $1 a month, you'll get all the episodes a little bit earlier, as well as patron voting rights, where you can do quarterly polls and all that other stuff. For $3 a month, you get everything I mentioned prior, plus patron shoutouts, which you heard at the beginning of this episode. For $4 a month, you get everything prior, plus 2 mini bonus episodes every month. And for $5 a month, you get everything I mentioned prior, or everything I mentioned before, plus access to my monthly movie podcast, which I guess when you know what, when the time this episode comes out, the second to last episode of Still Bonding, my monthly James Bond podcast where me and a bunch of friends bond over 007, that comes out this month, and then next month will be the final finale episode of that. And then after Still Bonding is over, we are starting up Still Family, my monthly Fast and Furious podcast. When my guests join me, they're not just friends, they're family. Or some other stupid pun or tagline I'm trying to figure out. But yeah, that's all over at patreon.com/stillloadingpod. You can get all that stuff over there. But that's it. That's all the time I have for you on this episode of Still Loading. Thank you all for listening. Sam, thank you again for joining me.
Thank you, Joshua.
And with all that said, listeners, I will see you all next time.
Over the forever shore, if the money died, I will make it right.